What happens when a former pop radio star with virtuoso-level guitar chops embraces yacht rock? My review of John Mayer's Sob Rock is coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. Now, before we get into the new album, I want to let you know that if you stick around to the end of this video, we will literally get into the album. I'll share an unboxing of Sob Rock so you can see if the retro style from the cover runs through the entire package. And if you do want to add the CD or vinyl to your collection, be sure to look for the Amazon order links in the description below. Back in 2002, during the height of John Mayer's breakout success with his debut album Room for Squares, I went to see him in concert. 20 years later, there's only two things I remember about that show. The first is how great his opening act, Robert Randolph and the Family Band, turned out to be. And the second is how deafeningly loud the young female fans were as they sung along to every word of every song Mayer performed. I've been to a lot of shows, and I've heard a lot of fans sing along at almost every one of them, but never at the volume and intensity or as off-pitch as they did at this concert. I find it hard to believe I'd have the same experience at a John Mayer concert today. Over the span of the past 2 decades, Mayer's music has made an interesting transition from bouncy guitar pop to what I broadly describe as adult contemporary. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It's simply a statement of how much John Mayer's music has mellowed since he first sang of running through the halls of his high school or professed your body to be a wonderland. Not that this trajectory was entirely unexpected. Mayer was signaling in that direction pretty clearly with the surprising maturity of songs like Daughters from 2003's Heavier Things and Gravity from 2006's Continuum. Of course, there's a consequence to that kind of musical shift, and it's been a decade since John Mayer has had a certified hit single. His albums routinely chart well upon release, but quickly fade after his dedicated fans buy their copies. Everything goes gold, but platinum hasn't been in his vocabulary since Battle Studies in 2009. None of that is an indictment of the quality of his output, simply a reflection of its popularity. As much as I've remained a fan of Mayer's music throughout his career, I will admit that none of those diminishing returns are surprising to me. I've enjoyed every album, but find myself revisiting them less and less. In fact, the one I return to the most is the one I've previously featured as part of my Great 28 Live series, and that's 2005's live album Try with the John Mayer Trio. That very blues-centric collection truly captured the best of Mayer's talents, pairing his best-written material with a selection of rock and blues classics, all keeping his guitar work front and center. And I must say that for as accomplished a player as Mayer is, it's that particular skill that I feel like he's consistently shied away from spotlighting on his own material. It's true, he still finds outlets for showcasing his craft in other ways, be it festival appearances or his ongoing gig with Dead & Company. Still, I truly wish we heard more of it on his studio albums. Sob Rock is no exception. This new album may well be Mayer's least guitar-driven collection of songs to date. Not that the actual songs suffer for that deficit necessarily. In fact, in most cases, they work perfectly well for what they are. And what most of them are is a tribute of sorts to the soft rock sounds of the early 80s. If the music didn't make it obvious, the cover art should be a dead giveaway. As someone who truly began to discover music during that era, that cover was something I felt an instant affinity for. I love the retro portrait style, like a long-lost Christopher Cross album. And of course, there's the Nice Price sticker, a throwback to when Columbia Records used to discount some of the lesser albums from major artists for record shoppers looking for bargains. The sounds Mayer explores on many of these songs is actually, in some ways, fairly contemporary. In our what goes around comes around culture, we've been hearing similar musical explorations from a variety of current acts, including Mac Miller and Tame Impala. I haven't been that huge a fan of that sort of thing from most of those artists, but somehow I think the style works well in Mayer's hands. The album opens strong with Last Train Home. Here, Mayer sets the tone for much of what is to follow, with opening synths that have a patently 80s vibe reminiscent of Steve Winwood. The guitar comes in quickly as if an introduction that yes, this is a John Mayer album. Still, he keeps the six strings more in the background, mostly for texture and occasional accents. I really like the rhythms on this song, as well as many of the interesting sonic flourishes. What I could give or take, though, is the guest vocals from Maren Morris. Her contribution is tasteful enough, but I don't think it adds much to the track that a pair of anonymous backing vocals couldn't have done just as effectively. Next on It Shouldn't Matter, But It Does, we get a tender ballad that pairs acoustic guitar and piano with lush 80s style synth strings. It's a little bit of an I'm on fire feeling here, but far less haunting. And not that I'm offended by profanity, but the fact that he drops an F-bomb during one of the verses does take me a bit out of the 80s vibe for a moment. It doesn't feel authentic to me. Then on track 3, we get what may be my favorite song on the album, the quirky and occasionally funky New Light. I really love the Nile Rodgers style guitar riffs and of course the fluttering keyboard accents that are just irresistible. I could totally have heard this being pushed into a little more of an R&B direction by someone like Quincy Jones and turned into a hit back in the day for someone like Michael Jackson. It's definitely the most toe-tapping track on Sob Rock, which is also a bit disappointing. I'd really like to have heard more tracks playing in a similar space. Next we move solidly into AM Gold territory with Why You No Love Me. As the track begins, we hear some of those country pop textures of the late 70s, like the weeping guitar strands at the end of the opening phrases. But by the second verse, we start to hear more tropical textures that kind of sneak up on you before you realize it. I feel like maybe I'm listening to a Rupert Holmes B-side here. And upon my first few listens, I felt like the ending was a bit too cheap and tidy. But now I feel like that hotel bar band finish may well be what he was going for here. On track 5, we get Wild Blue, one of the more musically interesting tracks on the album. I don't love the song as songs go, but I really do enjoy the instrumentation quite a bit. There's some really nice counter melodies going on that are reminiscent of Steely Dan crossed with Fleetwood Mac, as well as not one but two guitar solos that both pull strongly into Dire Straits territory. Unquestionably, this is the most shining guitar work on the entire album, and it definitely leaves me wanting more. Kicking off the second half of Sob Rock is what I'd say is likely the album's weakest track. Shot in the Dark has both a cliche title and a cliche melodic structure. The song desperately needs an irresistible hook to elevate things, but it never comes. In fact, what the song most sounds like is a theme song from some canceled 80s sitcom, like if CBS had tried to clone NBC's Family Ties. Shot in the Dark, Tuesdays at 8, 7 Central. You're thinking about it right now, aren't you? You're casting that show in your imagination. And you know what? That's a more interesting endeavor than the song itself. Just saying. Next up is a song that in some ways is out of character on this album, if only because it feels more in alignment with the folksy sounds Mayer explored on his previous few albums. I Guess I Just Feel Like is a very self-reflective song, with Mayer exploring his feelings of sorrow and depression. It's the most guitar-centric song on Sob Rock, which is a nice change of pace, really. In fact, the solos are pretty great here, channeling a David Gilmour-esque sound that's very effectively emotive. At just under 5 minutes, it feels weird to point out that this is the longest song on the album, but I gotta say, as the track fades out over the guitar solo, I just don't want it to end. Till the Right One Comes finds John Mayer back in AM Gold territory again and picking up the tempo considerably. There's a lot to like here, from the fluttering synth highlights to the slide guitar accents. Plus, there's two different breakdowns that each manage to perk things up and inject a welcome playfulness into the proceedings. I'm not loving the hand claps, sparingly used as they may be, and once again we get a fade out over an all too brief guitar solo, and by brief, I mean only seconds into it. John, you tease us. On the second to last song, we get a bit of a mixed bag. Carry Me Away has nice, simple piano highlights and cool, distant percussive accents. But the rhythm is monotonous, and the vocal feels flat and uninspired. Thankfully, it's also the shortest song on the album, so it doesn't hang around so long as to wear out its welcome. Sob Rock comes to a close with All I Want Is to Be With You, a cool and cinematic country rock slow burner. As much as I really like the instrumentation and the anthemic rhythm, there's nothing even remotely original about this song. It feels good, no doubt, but we've heard it all before. Still, we get what is probably the album's most blistering guitar solo here, which, once again, why, fades out far too soon. There's a lot of songs on Sob Rock that will probably translate really well live, especially if Mayer lets himself stretch out a bit and show off his guitar chops. I don't know why he keeps them so truncated here. I'd understand back in the days of No Such Thing, trying to limit the solos since the teenage girls couldn't sing along to those. But with Mayer now pushing 40, as he says on one track, and by the way, he's 43, I think he's clearly been embracing a more mature sound that likely appeals to a more mature audience. Perhaps he's second-guessing himself here by exercising such restraint. Still, there's plenty of solid music on this song cycle, and much of it does indeed explore vibes I don't feel like we've heard from him before. And honestly, New Light could potentially develop into his first decent hit in years. To be fair, he actually did release the song on its own a few years ago, but he's trying to give New Light a new life now as a formal single from the new album. I hope it works. Meanwhile, I have to say that as an almost concept album, Sob Rock connected more strongly with me than any of his albums since Born and Raised in 2012. No doubt the musical era he's mining here is one that inherently resonates with my own, age. But still, I think this homage to yacht rock is successful more often than not. So I'm giving Sob Rock by John Mayer an X rating of 7 out of 10. It's a millennial's compelling tribute to a guilty pleasure genre that's bound to make Gen Xers smile. Okay, as promised, here's a look at the CD version of Sob Rock by John Mayer. Again, I really love the 80s retro style of the art. And as you see here, the classic Nice Price sticker is actually a sticker on the wrapper as opposed to being part of the cover art. Here's a look at the unwrapped front cover, and the spine, and the back cover. Here's a look at the CD with the classic Columbia logos. There's no art under the CD tray. Finally, we'll take a look through the CD booklet, which, for better or worse, is very true to the retro era in that there is nothing inside but black and white pages with all the song lyrics and the album credits. So there you go, Sob Rock by John Mayer. If you'd like to add a copy of this to your music collection, be sure to look for Amazon ordering links in the description below. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to click subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.